And so we allow ourselves to not resist the change, but to step into the change so that the change changes us in a way that makes us all the better for it.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. In this show, I will introduce you to ideas, concepts, and mindsets that will open your mind to a new world of well-being and personal life growth. Through eye-opening interviews, we elevate people in the world doing amazing things for humanity and share insights that will shift you to become the happiest, healthiest, kindest, and most compassionate version of you. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Things You Can't Unhear. Now, whether you believe in God or a higher power, or perhaps it's your intuition or spirituality, I recommend you take a listen to this episode, as the ideas raised with us will most definitely make you see life with a fresh perspective. Neale Donald Walsch joins us on the show today for the second time. He's an author and a modern-day spiritual messenger and has written 37 books, including his really well-known series of books called Conversations with God, which have transformed and inspired the lives of millions of people, regardless of their religious beliefs. Neale's books and insights are said to be messages that came directly through him from God, as he set out one day in his frustrations with life to write a letter to God. And again, whether that is too much for your belief system to get your head around, the wisdom that is found in the pages of these books is hard to ignore. And you almost find yourself not caring who wrote it, because the lessons are still there regardless of who put these ideas down on paper. When you look at my religious background, for example, I was christened in a Greek Orthodox church. I went to an Anglican school for 13 years. And then I married a Catholic-raised man in a Catholic church. I know, right? It's a lot. I was raised to believe in what is known in the Christian faith to be God. However, with the knowledge of all these religions playing some part of my life, I've chosen now to believe simply in a higher power rather than just choose one religion to follow. And I feel Neale's openness to all beliefs is what makes his message so powerful. So in this episode with Neale, he talks about how we evolve as a species and how to connect with ourselves and also see ourselves in others and in every experience. We learn from these current times that we are going through now more than ever that we are all one and none of us are separate from each other. And also not to be afraid of change and instead embrace it and be open to the lessons it can teach us. We'll also learn how to live life with compassion, awareness, and look at life with a completely different lens. So Neale, thank you for being on the show. I'm so glad that you've been able to join me again today. And I think at this time that we're going through, it's such a perfect time to talk to you about the messages in Conversations with God. I'd love to just start by prefacing that so many people call your book Conversations with God, or all of your 4 books, Conversations with God, their favorite of all time. And that's including me for sure. It's just filled with so much wisdom. And even people who have no or very little religious belief resonate with it so much. I want to know why you believe it makes such a huge impact on people.
The reason is this, in my opinion. I think people see a commonality between my experience and their experience. And that's, at the bottom line, why so many people resonate with what they have found in the Conversations with God books. They're seeing a level of commonality that they really can't find in their religion of choice, if they even have a religion of choice, and they can't find in their philosophy of life at that level of duplication. You know, I seem to be, I don't know whether you're aware of a man named James Thurber, but I seem to be James Thurber's everyman. In other words, I seem to have captured the essence of the experience of people all over the world. So that tells me why millions and millions of people in many languages, you know, the book is in what they tell me now, 37 languages. It almost doesn't matter what language or what culture. So it's cross-cultural, it's transnational, it's transgender, it's transracial. It's just every human being really has found, I shouldn't say every human being, but many, many, many human beings have found a level of resonance because it's so duplicative of their own experience. And so when I somehow seem to have struck a chord, I think, you know why? I think because I've been so vulnerable. I think I've been so willing to just spiritually undress, emotionally, to stand emotionally naked really before the world, in the sense that I'm able to say, hey, you know what? I don't know how it's been for you guys, but this is how it's been for me. And I don't understand a bit of it. I didn't understand a bit of it. Is there somebody who can tell me what it is that I don't understand, the understanding of which would change everything? And along came this wonderful ability to reach inside of myself to the place that exists within all of us, that God exists in all of us. But along came that ability where God said, okay, Neale, look, it's really very simple. Here's how it is. Ask away. Ask me any question you want. And I found that all of us can do that. That if all of us simply reach inside to ask ourselves for the answers, we can find the answers. Here's what's unusual, or here's what's interesting about this. While all of us can reach inside to ask ourselves those questions and find the answers, many, many people don't believe the answers that they found inside of themselves, often because they're too good to be true. And often because they stand aside from or are different from what their culture, their family, their experience has taught them. So the answers are so different from what we're hearing from every other source that we say, well, I'm making it all up, or I'm imagining it. And that's the one thing I didn't do. The one thing I didn't do was to reject it out of hand, all of the answers that I was getting, because it was different from what my culture told me, what my society told me, what my family said was true. I just thought, I just played this wonderful game with myself, Maritza, where I said, I get that this is completely revolutionary in many respects, but what if it were not? What if it were actually true? And I gave myself permission to keep listening rather than shutting off the flow because it sounded absurd or other than what I had been told. And you know what? I have to say one thing. That required a certain level of courage because what I was hearing was so much the antithesis of what my religion and my culture had taught me that I thought that I was really crossing a line. I shouldn't be doing this. In fact, I have to be honest, and I've told people this before. I thought at first, my God, I'm trafficking with the devil. I'm really just, I'm playing right into the devil's hands by even listening to this, much less allowing myself to believe any of it. So it took me, and then after I got that out of my head, I finally said, well, okay, fair enough. Maybe there is no devil. I made all that up. Then I say, okay, I'm not trafficking with the devil, but I am going out of my mind. Because I actually think I'm hearing this voice in my head, or I'm actually thinking that these thoughts are real. So I went from, my thoughts about Satan to my thoughts about my sanity, from Satan to sanity.
That's fair.
and then to saintliness. That is the saint not being me, but God. So I went from Satan to sanity to saintliness, listening to the voice of God that exists within all of us and giving myself permission to believe what I was hearing, even though it was too good to be true. And I asked, I'm not going to give you a 4-hour answer to every one of your 20-second questions, but let me give you this last sentence. I remember saying to God, this is all too good to be true. You, the God that's showing up right here, you're too good to be true. And I remember God's answer. It made me chuckle and laugh out loud. She said, hey, my sweet Neale, if God can't be too good to be true, who can?
I love that so much. For people who say don't believe in God,
how do you describe God personally? How you just said she. For so many of us, it's always been explained as a he, for example. There's so many different definitions that you give God that are so different to what we've been taught to believe.
Well, I don't try to describe God, because the minute one decides to describe God, we limit what God is. The very act of trying to develop a definition of who and what God is creates a limitation around the infinite. It's like trying to define the infinite. I'd like you, Maritza, right now, you have some time here. Please give me a description of everything in existence. I'll wait.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
know.
We
An
don't have enough
impossible
time.
task.
Well, it might not even be an impossible task if you have 600 years in which to do it. But if I ask you to do it in 60 seconds, it might be a little bit more difficult. So to try to define God is the same thing for me. How do I define the indescribable? How do I describe it? And so for me, God, in one sentence, God is the all in all. There is nothing that is not God, and that includes everything in existence and everything that we do not see in our existence, but that exists nonetheless. So, or as God put it herself, because he was so clear in his first description of this. He said in book 1, page 1, he said, all things are one thing.
Mm.
There is only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. So I think if God were to say to me, this is what I am, God would say, I am that I am.
It's such a profound saying, because I've heard you explain that, and I've heard that saying many, many times over and over. But I heard you say that once in a different context, and that made me truly understand it, because you put a comma somewhere. You put a comma after I am that, comma, I am.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Oh, sure. I was walking down the street one day years ago with a spiritual teacher, friend of mine. She was a lovely lady who taught classes in spirituality and so forth. And I was told in conversations with God that an exercise I could use was to say to myself, whenever I laid my eyes on anything, the tree across the street, the storefront that I was walking by, maybe the wino sitting on the sidewalk with his bottle of alcohol in a paper bag and a little basket next to him asking for money, whatever I laid my eyes on, I was invited to say to myself, I am that. I am that. And that was an exercise that God gave me as a way of experiencing, not just knowing conceptually or theoretically, but experiencing actually that I am everything I am looking at, that there's no separation between me and anything else. Now, one day I'm walking down the street in the little town in which I live with my spiritual teacher. We had just had lunch. We were heading to the parking lot to our car, and I was practicing that discipline. And my friend looked at me. She saw me, with having this look on my face. I wasn't saying anything out loud, of course. It was all done silently in my mind. But she said, Neale, what are you doing? And so I explained to her. I said, well, I'm just saying I am that. When I look at other people, when I look at other things, she said, Neale, you're starting to freak me out. You're not that. You're you. I said, I know I am. I know I am me. I'm not saying that I'm not me, but I'm saying that the me that I am includes everything that I'm looking at. I am that. I am that. I am that. She said, you are not that. Neale, you're making me crazy. You're not that. You're you. And so I said, no, you don't understand. I am that. I am. And that's when it struck me. I found myself saying what I had heard from 1,000 different sources all my life. And I said it to her, but I said it to her almost as a point of an argument. I said, no, you don't understand. I am that. I am. And then I realized, wow, that's what God's been saying to us from the beginning. But when we copied it down, those of us who heard it, we forgot to put the comma in. What God was saying is, Neale, I am that, comma, I am. And and then I heard it in a whole different way.
So
And I
did I
shared that
when you
with her.
explained it. It was just a profound moment for me. I'd heard that many times and it meant not that much to me. And when you explained it like that, it was just this moment of like, of course that's what it meant. But
Well, and even that spiritual teacher that I was walking with was stunned by that explanation. She said, "Wow, I think I've just learned something here today."
yeah,
So it's an eye opener,
it
uh,
definitely
for,
is.
for sure.
Now, journaling is ultimately what happened when you wrote this book. You got pen and paper and you wrote down your frustrations to begin with, I suppose, and then the answers came. Is writing things down something that you've always used in your life to release what you're feeling?
No, no, not in the way that you're describing. No. And have I occasionally written a letter to somebody that I really wanted to get something off my chest with? Yes, I've done that. But as a routine, as a regular practice, writing down something that I was feeling or experiencing, no, I have never really kept a diary. I've never really kept a journal. I've never really had kept a record in writing of what's going through my mind and what I'm thinking of. So yeah, there have been occasions in my life. Maybe I can think of 4 or 5 times in my adult life where I actually wrote a letter to somebody. I need to tell you this, but that was very, very rare. So it was not my practice to keep a written record or a journal or a diary of my life experience. But I can tell you, it became my practice very fast when I had my first conversation with God.
Amazing. Well, I'd love to dig into how the messages from conversations with God can be used for the time that we're facing right now around the pandemic and around the self-distancing and all of the changes in life and the uncertainty that we're going through. It's such a great time for us to think and behave as a collective. And I want to get your insights from the book on how we can best use this time right now and take on those messages in the best possible way.
Well, Rich, in my opinion, we can use the present conditions of life on Earth as a means of fulfilling the agenda of our soul. So I happen to believe we have a thing called a soul. I don't think I'm merely a body or a mind. I think I'm a 3-part being made up of body, mind, and spirit, or if you please, body, mind, and soul. And, there are a lot of people who think that. Many people of religion think that. Uh, Actually, billions of people probably think that. But I'm not sure that many people think, okay, wait a minute. If I am a 3-part being made up of body, mind, and soul, what is the agenda of my soul? Or those who do think that their soul has an agenda, imagine that what their religion has told them is the agenda of the soul, which is to somehow get back to God after being, for whatever reason, thrown out of God's presence, after being, pushed away from God, or after somehow finding ourselves outside of God's kingdom, in metaphorically speaking. So we think of ourselves as somehow, or at least many people of traditional faith think of themselves as no longer in the Garden of Eden, and our job is to get back to God. And that's what they think is the agenda of the soul. And if they think they have a soul at all, and of course there are billions of people who wouldn't even say that. They don't believe in a God, and they don't believe that they're anything more than biological creatures. Which, by the way, if I could just offer a short diversion here from my answer briefly, I think one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest decisions that people are being invited to make during this time, and for that matter, during all of their life, is this: who am I? Am I really just a biological creature? Am I a mammal? Am I not that much different from a dolphin or a whale or a bird in the sky or a dog or a fish? Maybe more complex, fair enough, maybe the most complex life form, but am I essentially, when all is said and done, simply a biological entity living on the earth? Or is it possible, just possible, that I'm more than that I'm a spiritual entity having a body and a mind? Is it possible that my body is not who I am? It's something I have. Is it possible that my mind is not who I am? It's something that I have. if that's possible, then who is the I that has these things? And furthermore, why is the I that has these things here? What am I doing here on the earth? If I'm a spiritual entity, why in the world would I place myself in this physical environment and live this life that we are all finding ourselves living? What's that about? I think these are questions that not the largest number of people are asking. And so I think the first step toward moving into a level of spiritual or greater spiritual awareness and clarity is to ask ourselves, who am I? What is my true identity? Am I a physical creature when all is said and done? A chemical element in the universe? Or am I a spiritual entity, a spiritual element of a universe that is largely spiritual and manifesting as that which is physical? But I think the way to apply the messages of Conversations with God is to first make a firm decision, come to a conclusion, if I could put it that way, come to a conclusion about who we are. Now, if we decide that we are just chemical creatures, basically a biological entity, fair enough, then we will approach events like the coronavirus outbreak in one way. We will say, oh, wow, this is horrible. And, why is this happening? And what can I do to keep myself safe? And we'll have all sorts of other ideas and concerns and worries about it. If I have decided that actually I am a spiritual entity having a physical experience, then I would ask myself, I would contextualize the experience of the coronavirus, or for that matter, any experience in my life. I would contextualize it in a different container. I would say to myself, okay, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And for that matter, what is the agenda of my soul? If I'm clear spiritually, then I understand that the agenda of my soul is evolution, to evolve, to become a greater and greater version and a larger and larger expression of who and what I really am. That's the point of all of life. And we see life doing that all over the cosmos, becoming a greater and greater version and a larger and larger expression of the source energy from which it emerged. That process we loosely call evolution. And we see life evolving in all of its countless forms wherever we lay our eyes. So if we decide that we are spiritual entities whose agenda is to continue to evolve, and if we decide that evolution is just another word meaning the fuller and fuller, richer and richer, larger and larger expression of the source energy from which we emerged, or if I could put it in theological terms, becoming grander and grander experiences of the divine. By the way, it's very dangerous to speak that way. When a person says things like that, they sometimes tend to really make you wrong. They might even say things like, by whose authority are you acting like this? And they might even, if you're not careful, put you on a cross and crucify you and say, who do you think you are? And if that person says, I don't know how to tell you this in a way that won't make you angry, I think that I'm God. And I think we all are. I and the Father are one, and we are all brothers and sisters. Why are you so amazed? These things will you do also. And so now we're coming to this point in time when, as a very young species in our development, it is occurring to us, wow, he could have been right. And he's not the only spiritual messenger who's told us that. Virtually every messenger of every spiritual tradition has said essentially the same thing, each in their own way. And so, to answer your question directly, when we see the coronavirus outbreak as another event in our exterior world that brings us an opportunity in our interior world to announce and declare, to express and fulfill, to become and experience who we really are at the next grandest level, we then use it as a device for which it was actually designed. Now, this is going to be hard to hear, what I'm going to say next, because it's a revolutionary statement, but we can even find a way to be grateful for it. We can say, thank you, God, for this opportunity an extraordinary event in the life of our species, allowing all of us to look again to see if we really have totally understood who we are and why we're here and what our opportunity is as this species called human beings. And is there something that we have not fully understood about this? I mean, is it possible, just possible, that there's something we don't fully understand about life, about God, and about ourselves, the understanding of which would change everything? So I've come to the conclusion, Maritza, that there's more going on here than meets the eye. Or as my dear brother William Shakespeare put it so beautifully many years ago, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
It's such a beautiful way that you put all of this. And it is definitely, in my opinion, also such a perfect way, a perfect time in our lives to shift, to learn, to evolve. And if we all think as a collective right now, it's going to be so, so powerful. But if we collectively think in a fear-based way, that can also be incredibly powerful in not a so grand way. So for us to think as a collective with the greater good of humanity in our sights, that would be quite special right now.
You're, of course, perfectly correct. And I'm reminded of the words of the American president from several years ago, Franklin Roosevelt, who said during the Second World War to all Americans and to all people everywhere around the world, his words ring true to this day. He said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And that is profoundly true. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. I've taken a look at the word fear, F-E-A-R. It's an acronym. Some people say the acronym is, the letters stand for false evidence appearing real. But I like my acronym better. F-E-A-R, feeling excited and ready. If we allow ourselves to look at the coronavirus outbreak as an opportunity to feel excited and ready for what it can bring us an opportunity to create within ourselves, about ourselves, with regard to ourselves and the world at large, it could turn out to be the most transformative single experience that has visited this planet in hundreds of years. And has it caused the death of many, many thousands of people? Yes. If we believe that death is the end of life in the individual expression that we have become so attached to, we would see that as a terrific tragedy. And in human terms, of course, one can't deny that it is tragic. But in spiritual terms, if we really understand that we are not our body and we are not our mind, but that we are spiritual entities, then we come upon the second question. If we are spiritual entities, was there a time when we were not? And is there a time when we will not be again? That is, will we ever die? And the answer that I've received in conversations with God, and by the way, virtually every major religion on the face of the earth agrees with this one. Every major religion on earth says the soul is eternal. Many religions will tell us, yes, you're going to live in eternal hell. And some people have told me that because of what I'm sharing with the world. But there's no argument whether we live in heaven or hell that the soul is eternal. There's no argument among the world's major religions around that idea. So when we see that, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to live forever? And I'm going to live forever in the arms of God, in the lap of love, in an environment in which I know and experience, express, and fulfill who I really am, then we don't even mourn in the classical way we understand mourning, the death of those who have left us, as a means of demonstrating to us the opportunity that now lies before us. So I am sad about the deaths that have been caused by the coronavirus, but I don't see it as a tragedy for them. I see it as a tragedy for those of us who will miss their presence. We'll miss our friends, our relatives, maybe, God forbid, our parents who have died from the virus outbreak. And so the sadness is understandable, but it's not that we are sad for them, because we really do understand that their lives go on and on and on forever and ever, and even forevermore. And we express our gratitude to them for, I speak metaphorically now, giving up their life so that we might awaken to the possibilities that present themselves to all of us who continue our physical expression on the earth during this time and in this place.
When you look at death in that way, there really is little to fear, isn't there? It's amazing.
No, there's nothing to fear. And I've had a near-death experience, and it was very, very real to me. Not a lot of people. I have had an experience like that relative to the total number of people on the planet. I realize that I'm in the minority, but I had a very real near-death experience. And it was not, the way we might classically think, maybe on the operating table or having been hit by a car and I'm lying in the street or anything. It was just simply during a normal process that we call dreaming. But I did have an out-of-body experience that was very, very real, and a death experience. And having, once you have the experience of what psychologists call a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience like that, it's very difficult to convince yourself to be upset about death. See, I'm sorry, but I know too much. Been there, done that, went to the quote-unquote other side. And the regret was not that I went to the other side, but that I came back. Because when you do come back from such an experience, and I've had a couple of close calls as well in my life. I've had open heart surgery where they said, well, Mr. Walsh, you're going to have, a triple bypass. Well, turns out they were wrong. I didn't need a triple bypass. I needed a quintuple bypass.
Wow.
They had to take 5 arteries out of my heart and replace them with arteries from elsewhere in my body. And then a year after it, not even a full year later, I wound up having, a problem with my aorta, and I had an aortic aneurysm. So they had to go back in there and do that. And I can give you all sorts of other, I broke my neck in a car accident, as many people who know my story know. And when you break your neck, it's like this. You can actually hear your neck being broken. It's a snap. And you realize, oh my God, I think I just broke my neck. And then you can't hold your head up. And then they take you to the hospital. Then the doctor looks at you just before he puts you under and he says, you're a very lucky man. You understand, don't you, that 98% of the people who break their neck die. We're going to see if we can keep you alive and even keep you from being paralyzed for the rest of your life, both of which were the blessings that I received. So when I've come back from my out-of-body experience and my near-death experience, I can tell you it caused me to stop and think, what am I doing here? What is the real purpose and the real function of my life? Am I here to get the girl, get the car, get the job, get the house, get the kids, get the spouse, not necessarily in that order, get the grandkids, get the office in the corner with my name on the door and the windows, get the building with my name on the building, get the better car, get the better house, get the better spouse, get the better spouse, get the better spouse, until I can finally find the spouse that's good enough for me? I mean, is that what I'm doing here? Is that really the formula for my life? Or is there something else that is my true agenda that has nothing to do with any of that? I might do those things, but I might now do those things for a different reason. I might now do those things in order to demonstrate my highest thought about who I am, rather than trying to get to that place.
That's definitely what your book does to us. And I think, a lot of people take that big moment in their lives where they are having an accident, or they are on, the corner of crossing over to the other side, or they are very ill, to wake up and start thinking about life in a different way. And I love how your book you can pick up these pages and start to think about life so differently within these pages, regardless of what's happened to you, regardless of the experiences that you are having at that particular time. And I say this to so many people: you don't need to reach that point of no end to make a decision to live life with a different perspective.
And a different reason, Rich. The reason, the change in your reason is what really creates a different life, and you have suddenly a different purpose for even remaining alive. I remember that I asked God, "What does it take to make life work? I don't understand. I mean, please, God, just give me the rule book. I promise I'll play. I promise I'll play. Just give me the rules." And after you give me the rules, don't change them, because they're changing every other week. I don't even know what's true anymore. I remember that the answer I got from God was so sweet and so unforgettable. There was a chuckle in God's voice as he gave me the answer. And it wasn't a derisive chuckle like, you poor, poor sad person who don't have the answers. It was more of a loving chuckle, like a mother would have watching her child trying to put her Legos together. It's not quite working. And so she said to me, Neale, it's really very simple. You ask, how can you make your life be what you want it to be? Why isn't your life working? It's really very simple. You think your life is about you, and your life has nothing to do with you. All of these questions you've been asking me have been about you. Neale this, Neale that, Neale's problems, Neale's wishes, Neale's hopes, Neale's dreams, Neale's sadnesses, Neale's frustrations. Neale, sweetheart, your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. And that's what you have not understood, the understanding of which will change everything.
Such a powerful way to look at life. That quote is definitely up on my fridge and has been there for a long time. And I live by that so much. There's so much compassion in that. There's so much togetherness in that. And it brings me to ask you this as well, because last time we spoke on this podcast, I asked you what you thought the biggest problem in the world was today. And your answer was alienation.
I said the biggest problem is that nobody knows what the biggest problem is.
You did.
And that's causing alienation.
You did. In this time that we are facing, do you feel as though this awareness has started to shift?
Yes, I think that's absolutely, undeniably, observably true. The biggest problem in the world today is that we have not understood that we are all one. And so, because we think there's such a thing as separation, we think that we're separate from each other. We think that we're actually separate from the environment, from the earth on which we live. We think we're separate from God. We think that we're all separate entities out here. It's everyone for himself, doing the best we can. We try to be helpful to those we love and those who are close to us. But if they're not members of our family, if they're not members of our religion, if they're not members of our own race, if they're not members of our own nation, we have to build a wall and keep everybody who's not one of us away from us. And, how's that working, I wonder? How's that working? So what's happening with the coronavirus outbreak is that we are seeing all the walls that we have been told that we need to erect between us dropping down day by day. Oh, I see. The virus knows no barrier. The virus knows no boundary. And neither will the love that we can project if we seek to assist each other all over the world through this extraordinary time.
It's the them and the us that seems to be disappearing, which is so beautiful. For the first time, we're looking at the world as one, and we're all in the same boat at the same time. So it is such an incredibly special time for all of us right now. When I think about what's happening, and you've mentioned this as well, it's definitely an event. So for us to use this time proactively, And I've asked many people this question, and a lot of people bring in their life coach ideals, which are quite helpful. But to use this time proactively, in your opinion, what should we be doing?
Opening ourselves to an awareness of what this event has to do with the agenda of our soul, and then stepping fearlessly, courageously, and limitlessly, without limit, into the expression and the experience of that. And in practical terms, what does that mean? Because I know that that's lots of up in the air spiritual talk. In practical terms, what does that mean? Probably the same thing that the life coaches are telling you. Deciding that we are one with all others. We don't need to make anybody else wrong, to stop making each other wrong. And especially if we are in leadership positions, we don't need to use our leadership position to make other countries or other organizations or other political parties wrong. Stop demonizing everybody else except ourselves. I'm sorry to say that, without naming any names in particular, there are some world leaders who find it necessary to demonize everybody else, the other political party, the other country over there, the other organization that didn't do it right to begin with. It's the other, the other, the other, the other. It's their fault. And I have done everything perfectly right. You know, I mean, why? What is gained? What is benefited by us taking such a position, either individually, collectively, or globally? So I'm going to repeat what all the life coaches are saying. Let's step into the grandest notion we ever had about who we are. And then let's express ourselves in that way. Let's begin the healing of humanity by ending the notion of betterness. You know, Conversations with God said to me, there's one idea that human beings have had for these many years, for centuries, for millennia, actually, and that's the idea of superiority. The illusion that for some reason that you've got in your head, you think that you're superior to someone else. You know, whites are superior to blacks, or blacks are superior to whites. Men are superior to women, women are superior to men. You know, Catholics are superior to Jews, or Jews are superior to Catholic. We got this game going on where we keep comparing ourselves to everybody else in a way that allows us to come out on top and to announce our superiority. Oh my goodness. Excuse me, but what a primitive notion. What a totally uncultured, primitive, childish notion.
Totally. I want to ask you about human connection, because that's something that we are definitely having less of right now in these times. So for me and many others, connection is definitely medicine. And because we're missing it, we're trying to find different ways to connect. And we're doing that right now through technology. But would you say connection with others is one of the huge main cornerstones of the human experience?
Of course, the question answers itself. But I would also say that connection in the physical sense is not required for us to experience that energetic expression. We don't have to be in the same room. We don't have to be able to physically touch each other. It doesn't need to be a physical connection. It can be a metaphysical connection that is larger than physical. And often such a connection can even be stronger and more meaningful than if we are in the same room with another, or even in another's arms. You know, absence makes the heart grow fonder, not less fond. So I am discovering in my life, I just did a retreat this past weekend, That is, I facilitated an online retreat. 276 people signed up for that weekend retreat. And the comments we got from participants afterward was, wow, this was even better than being in the same room with each other. In many ways, it was better because of the energetic signature that was projected by all of us. So I'm not at all convinced that while connection is an important element, maybe the most important element in the expression of our humanity and of our true identity, while that is true, I'm not at all convinced that that level of connection needs to somehow be physical. And that translates into my ability to connect with God. You know, the Catholic Church, and not just the Catholic Church, but I think the Episcopalian Church as well, maybe there are other churches also, that actually use a process, a sacrament that they call communion. And the purpose of communion is for you to feel the physical presence of God actually in you. We take the host, the holy host, the wafer of bread that the priest declares is the body of God. And when he puts the host on your tongue, he actually says the words in Latin, the body of God, the body of God, the body of God, receive the body of God. Because the Catholic Church understood that those who have little belief, or those of lesser belief, needed something physical to allow them to experience the presence of God in them. But what if we didn't need physical communion to experience communion with God? I wrote a book titled Communion with God. And what if we could experience communion with God without necessarily having to have, and communion with each other for that matter, without necessarily having to have a physical encounter with it? And the way for me to do that is for me to notice, oh, I see. Wait a minute. Let me see if I got this right. If I want to experience the physical presence of God, if I want to experience physical communion with God, all I have to do is put my hands together. Just let one hand touch the other. And suddenly I'm touching God, which is, by the way, not coincidentally why we pray with our hands together. And if I want to experience the physical presence of another, all I have to do is connect with them through the physical expression of the energetic connection that we experience. That's a physical expression. We need to understand that the energetics of the universe are physical. They're not make-believe. They're not imaginary. We're not making it up. You know, when you walk across a crowded room and you see someone you love, you experience, even though you're not touching each other, you may not even be anywhere near each other, but you experience a physical connection, a physical response. And sometimes that physical response is not so easy to hide, especially if you're a male, but that's another whole story. But that person can be across the room, and you don't have to have any connection with them at all. So we've all experienced the reality that energy need not be present in the classical way that we talk about physicality. Metaphysicality is larger than the physical, and we can bridge the gap that exists physically between us through all manner and means. And by golly, what an inventive culture and civilization we have created to now be able to do that with our technologies, to be able to actually get on a screen and share our energetic presence with each other. And we're very fortunate to have that. In the flu epidemic of 1918, no such a thing was even close to being possible. So here we are going through another outbreak, another pandemic, but this time in a whole different way.
I'd love to hear about the retreats that you ran and what lessons you were teaching in those that we can take from our interview today as well.
They came out of a book that I wrote called When Everything Changes, Change Everything. And the book was advising people, inviting people is a better word, I think, to change everything about how they think with regard to life when everything in life is changing all around us. Change your idea of change itself, change your idea of why change occurs, change your idea of how you can respond and react to change your idea about life itself, and change your idea about who you are, as you and I spoke a little earlier, and change your notion about your true identity. So in the weekend retreat, we gave people tools with which they might affect and embrace those changes that I've just named. I'll just give you one example. When I invited people to change their idea about change itself. Most people think that change is not welcome unless it's really a change for the positive. But you know what? Sometimes even positive changes can be felt to be a little bit annoying. Like, why can't we just have everything stay the same? Why can't it just be stable? I remember my dad came home one day many years ago to the house, and my mother had just kind of slightly rearranged the furniture. She just wanted to have a little different setup in the living room. And she changed it. I thought it looked better. I really liked it. He walked in the house. He said, why can't things just stay the same? Do you have to change the furniture? Because he just didn't want, even though it was a change for the better. And by the way, I have to admit, within about 3 or 4 months, he agreed with her. He said, sweetheart, I really do like the living room better this way. But
once he got used to the change.
Yeah, exactly. But he realized that it was a change for the better. By the way, it's another thing that we talked about at the weekend. A really astonishingly revolutionary idea from the book. Here it is. The book tells us all change is change for the better. If it wasn't, it couldn't be happening, given who and what we are. Unless, of course, we are not divine beings, unless we actually are the victims of our own story, in which case it could happen that changes were changed for the worse. But in fact, all change is change for the better, in the sense that everything that changes offers us a new opportunity to announce and declare, to express and fulfill, to become and experience who we really are at the next level. Or to put it in a simple sentence, offers us an opportunity to evolve and to advance in our evolutionary process. So these are some of the tools that we gave people to give them a chance to look at, and to even change their idea about change itself. What if we decided that change was not an annoyance, but that it was in fact simply life showing up in a way that allows us to advance in our evolutionary process? Now, philosophers might think that way. People like the Dalai Lama might go to that place, or people like Eckhart Tolle, or others who have really reached that level of awareness. But what we did in our weekend retreat was to try to bring those thoughts and to explore them deeply with people who were online with us to see how they could make them practical in their everyday life. So one of the things we offered them was the notion to not resist change. There's an old saying from Conversations with God, what you resist persists. And so we allow ourselves to not resist the change, but to step into the change so that the change changes us in a way that makes us all the better for it.
Absolutely. Step into the change. What's life looking like change-wise where you're living right now?
Yes, well, we are sequestered in our homes these days. I don't know how long that will last, but for the moment and for the past 5 or 6 weeks, we've been self-sequestered. It's voluntary, of course. There's no law, but the governor has asked us to just stay in our homes and only go out for necessities. So once every 10 or 12 days, we run out to get some groceries in the house. And of course, we would go out if there was an emergency of some kind. But other than that, most people are not going anywhere. So the restaurants are empty, the bars are empty, the stores are empty, the shopping centers have no one in them. And things are very, very quiet around here. We are, living in that way with each other. And I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it a lot. It's been wonderful. for me to spend that kind of quality time with my sweetheart. It's just she and me in the house. And, for me, that's heaven. I couldn't ask for anything better. I don't have to leave here. I don't have to go do, I had to cancel several events, and it was the joy of my life. I had to actually cancel several speaking engagements that I would have had to get on an airplane and fly to in order to give a talk. So it's just been wonderful. God bless you.
Thank you. Is there anything that you are missing mostly right now?
No, really, I can't say there's anything that I'm missing, because I know that answer came so fast. It almost sounded a little bit arrogant, but it's true for me. I don't miss having a dinner out. My wife and I would have dinner out maybe 2 or 3 times a month, every other week or so. And maybe we'd catch a movie here and there. We aren't really party goers anyway, so we're not social butterflies. But no, honestly, if I miss anything, maybe it's being around the grandchildren, or being with my wife's mom, my mother-in-law, whose company we enjoy a lot. We'd like to visit with each other. Maybe I would amend my statement and not say no so fast, but nothing that I'm missing terribly. And if I want to connect with my mother-in-law, we can do it just the way you and I are doing right here, and by video and so forth. And so there doesn't seem to be a whole lot in my life that I'm hankering for or yearning for. It's been really nice to be able to just sit around the house, pick up a good book, read a good book, enjoy a quiet evening with my sweetheart, and not have to think that there's something we ought to be doing or should be doing or would have more fun doing, because it's just not our lived reality.
You're finding the joy now, and I'm so glad you're happy. And I'll just ask you one last question, and I apologize if you've answered it within all of the wonderful insights that you've given already. But when the world returns to its usual pace, what's the biggest lesson you wish humanity to learn from this?
That separation and denunciation need no longer be part of our human experience. That we can move forward and create a newer world, a better world, a more wonderful world, if we will release our idea that we are somehow other than each other. I have to tell you something, a little personal story, which is the basis of my relationship with my sweetheart. When my wife and I first met, we knew each other a very short period of time, and we knew each other well. I mean, we're adults here, so I mean intimately. We knew each other intimately for 1 week, at which time we were driving down the road, and she turned to me and she said, "I think we should be married." And I looked at her and I said, "You don't want to say that to me twice." She said, no, I really mean it. I think we should be married. I know that we've only been close for a week, but I think we should be married. And I held out my hand, kept one hand on the steering wheel, took my right hand and held it across the front seat and said, "Done." And we got married 2 days later. We flew to Las Vegas and got one of those 24-hour licenses and got married. I'm telling you this story for a reason, because I had to go out and get a ring. And I went to a ring maker a few miles from where I live. I looked online for someone, because I didn't want to just get any old wedding band. I wanted to get something that was special. So I got him to make a ring with a word carved on it, not just engraved, but actually carved out of silver. And it was the word that my new wife used to describe me all the time. If you were to meet us in person, you would see we're both wearing a ring with the letters OTHER on it. Because my sweetheart says to me, "You know what? You are my other." And I said, that's exactly how I feel about you. You're my other. You're not even, in a classic sense, someone I'm in love with. Of course, I am in love with you, but it goes beyond that. You're my other. I experience you as the other me. She says, "Yes, that's how I experience you." as the other me. And so I'm telling that story for a reason. When we can all put that ring on our finger and see everyone else as our other, the world will be transformed. And you know what's interesting? That's all that every spiritual teacher and master through the millennia have ever asked us, invited us, and encouraged us to do. That's all they've ever said. And we just can't seem to find a way to get it. But maybe this coronavirus outbreak would be a chance to move us at least a few steps closer to putting on the ring that says, "You're my other."
I'm Maritza Barone. Thank you for listening to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and if something really profound came up for you that you want to share, let's talk about it. You can find me on Instagram at Things You Can't Unhear or on my personal page at Maritza_Barone. And if someone you know will benefit from something that was said in this show, make sure you share it with them too. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and keep up to date with what's next. And if you can spare a few seconds, please rate and review the show on iTunes, just so other people can find us more easily and quickly. And as always, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.